the scene of a tranquil night, suddenly and violently torn apart by a horrific explosion. Late on the night of July 31st, 2014, the port city of Kaohsiung was engulfed in a sea of fire. Furniture, debris, flying everywhere. It was so surreal it felt like a scene from an apocalyptic movie. So is this a natural disaster or a man-made one? Why did such an unforeseen catastrophe occur in a peaceful, modern, first-class city like this? Let's follow the real traces of the event to learn more about the 2014 Kaohsiung gas explosion, where responsibility turned into tragedy in today. And as usual, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to follow more of our stories. Let's explore today. Kaohsiung is renowned as a beautiful coastal port city in Taiwan, a modern and vibrant metropolis, and is also known as a top-tier commercial and industrial center. However, everything changed in just one fateful night, July 31st, 2014. The entire world came to know Kaohsiung for a completely different reason. No one expected that a sudden accident would turn this city into a terrifying disaster scene straight out of a science fiction movie. The scene of the explosion was truly horrifying. The streets were torn apart, cracked wide open as if plowed by a giant worm. But the truth is even more frightening, when all this damage was caused by just a small crack deep within the sewer system. This crack caused a large amount of propylene, a flammable gas, to leak into the drainage system. And when this gas came into contact with a source of fire along the way, it quickly created a horrific explosion, blowing everything apart. 6 kilometers of Kaohsiung streets were severely damaged. And what is even more noteworthy is that the explosion occurred in a very densely populated area, very close to the city hall, the market area, and the bustling commercial centers. Returning to the time of the tragedy, the explosion occurred just 3 minutes before midnight and was followed by a 6-hour-long inferno. For most residents in the area, the explosion came too suddenly, like a shock falling from the sky. Many people even thought there was an earthquake, because almost no one knew that just beneath their feet, only 1 meter below the ground, there is an operational industrial gas pipeline, and no one is aware that it is in a state of severe deterioration, posing the risk of a horrific disaster. Here, let's take a closer look at the pipeline system that caused this tragedy. This industrial gas pipeline runs along the drainage system and consists of 3 different pipes, tasked with transporting gas from Kaohsiung port to industrial parks. The pipeline that caused the disaster was actually the smallest one, with a diameter of only 10 centimeters. Its mission is to transport gas from the China Gas Transportation and Distribution Corporation, abbreviated as CGTDC, to the LCI Chemical Company plant. This pipeline was built in 1994, which is 20 years before the accident occurred. And at that time, this area was still far from the city's residential areas. However, by 2014, everything had changed, and this area had become crowded. But the presence of the gas pipeline here is still not the main issue. The problem is that it was not properly maintained, leading to severe deterioration. Improper equipment maintenance along with the negligence of operators at both ends of the pipeline. And both on the CGTDC side and the LCI Chemical Company are the main causes of this horrific explosion. Moreover, the slow handling of the incident also made it impossible for the residents here to avoid the horrific explosion. Specifically, before the disaster, on the evening of July 31st, 2014, a number of residents living on Kaitong 2nd Street, Kaitong 3rd Street, and NHIF 1st Street in Tiantran District had discovered an unusual phenomenon. They saw white potato lines emerging from many sewer mouths. Recognizing the dangerous signs, the people quickly reported it to the authorities. At 8:50 p.m., the fire department was present at the scene to check the situation. After setting up a command post at the intersection, they proceeded to block the area and began spraying water into the manholes to limit the spread of the gas. The strong smell of gas rising from the manholes is clearly an alarming sign indicating a gas leak. However, at that time, the rescue team could not accurately determine what type of gas it was, nor could they find the source of the leak. Given that situation, in order to handle the incident safely and effectively, They decided to call in the Environmental Protection Agency's toxic expert team for assistance. But time was running out. The first explosion with a small intensity unexpectedly occurred at 22:20 before the experts from the Department of Environmental Protection could arrive. About 40 minutes later, the experts arrived and immediately began their inspection. Using an infrared spectrometer to scan the area and collect air samples for analysis, in order to identify the type of gas and determine the cause of the leak. Meanwhile, at the same time as the rescue team was handling the incident at the scene, at LCI port and chemical plant, the operators also noticed something unusual happening with the system. The first person to detect this abnormality was an operator at the LCI plant. He noticed that the amount of gas being supplied to the plant was zero and worried that an incident had occurred. Around 9 p.m., he called the operator at CGTDC port to check. However, on the other end of the line, the situation was completely different. The staff's equipment showed the gas flow rate at 33,000 kilograms. A figure much higher than the standard level of 23,000 kilograms. This indicated that gas was still being pumped out from the port at a high rate, but other suspicious signs appeared. The pressure in the pipeline dropped sharply from the normal 4 to 4.5 millipascals to 2.7 millipascals. Faced with a sharp drop in pipeline pressure, the operators at CGTDC port immediately shut down the pumps and closed the valves to ensure safety. After that, two operators, one at CGTDC port and one at LCI chemical plant, agreed to perform a pressure check. The check results showed no change in pressure with the valves closed. Perhaps this very result made them complacent. Although the gas output flow at the port was much higher than the input at the plant, the LCI staff still insisted on continuing to pump gas. And so, the wrong decision was made. The gas pumping continued. The equipment at CGTDC port showed the gas flow rate remained high, around 24,500 kilograms. But at the LCI plant, this figure was just over 7,000 kilograms per hour. Clearly, a large amount of gas had been lost along the way. The pipeline must have been leaking somewhere. However, instead of finding the cause and fixing the issue, the two operators decided to postpone it. Thus, the disaster slowly grew very near. At 23:33, the supervisor arrived at CGTDC port for the night shift. On his way to work, passing by Kaohsiung Law Street, he suddenly smelled a strong odor of gas. He knew well that the gas pipeline from his port ran right beneath this street. The intuition of an experienced person told him that something terrible was about to happen. Therefore, immediately upon arrival at work, he hurriedly reported his concerns to the operator in the control room. And this person decided to shut down the gas pump once again. But, unfortunately, it was all too late. By then, a massive amount of propylene gas, about 90,000 kilograms, had leaked into the drainage system, turning the area into a ticking time bomb about to explode. And then, the unwanted event occurred. Exactly at 23:57, a horrific explosion shook the entire Tien Tran district. Giant fireballs rose into the night sky, dyeing the entire area red. The destructive force of the explosion was so immense that it could hurl cars from the streets onto the roofs of nearby buildings. Even fire trucks were overturned. All windows in the area shattered completely. From bricks, concrete to signs and trees, flying through the air like deadly arrows, causing fatal injuries to passers-by and severely damaging surrounding buildings. In an instant, the entire route along Kaohsiung 2, Kaohsiung 3, and NHI 1 streets was completely wiped out. All that remained of the streets was collapsed ruins tumbling into the drainage system. The horrific explosion also woke up the entire Kaohsiung city. Immediately, firefighting forces from all over the city, even from neighboring districts, were dispatched to the scene. They had two urgent tasks at that moment: extinguish the still fiercely burning fires and participate in searching for and rescuing trapped people. The situation was so critical that even the military was mobilized to assist. However, the rescue efforts encountered countless difficulties. Rescue workers had to operate under extremely dangerous conditions. They had to urgently search for victims while guarding against the risk of further explosions. They were not allowed to use heavy equipment to avoid shaking the ground. which could detonate remaining pockets of gas. Instead, they had to use life detectors and sniffer dogs to locate people buried under the rubble. And when victims were found, they could only use their bare hands and small tools to dig carefully, bit by bit, to safely extract the victims. The scene after the explosion was devastating, with victims lying everywhere, some buried under drainage ditches, others thrown onto rooftops, and some even flung as far as 100 meters. In the first hours after the explosion, due to the large number of injured, ambulances were insufficient to transport everyone. So they had to mobilize additional cars and trucks from residents to move the victims to hospitals. The injured were taken to 20 different hospitals for treatment. Most of them suffered severe burns or injuries from debris. Faced with the emergency, the city government was forced to order an urgent evacuation of residents from the area due to fears of further explosions. However, residents were allowed to return home by noon the next day, after the area was inspected by experts and declared safe. Rescue operations were extremely urgent and lasted for several consecutive days with the participation of over 5,500 people, including firefighters, military, police, and volunteers. At the end of the search campaign, the final, heartbreaking statistics were released. The total number of injured reached 321 people, and sadly, the explosion claimed the lives of 32 people, including 2 firefighters who bravely sacrificed themselves while on duty. Their bodies were never found. Among the fires that broke out after the explosion, the largest and last fire to be extinguished was near the intersection of Ershi 1st Road and Kaidong 3rd Road. Firefighters struggled greatly to control this fire. It wasn't until 6 a.m. the next day, when all the leaked gas had burned out, that the fire was completely extinguished. As this was the longest-lasting fire, inspectors speculated that this was the initial location where gas began to leak and accumulate, leading to the horrific accident. After the last fire was extinguished and the air had cleared, the investigation team began searching for the cause of the explosion. They inspected the drainage ditch, which was identified as the initial explosion point. And here, they discovered a gas pipeline running from CGTDC port to LCI chemical plant. On the pipe body, there was a hole measuring 4 centimeters by 7 centimeters. This was clear evidence that gas had leaked from this pipe and caused the disaster. The investigation team continued to inspect the pipe more carefully and discovered a crucial detail. The pipe wall thickness had reduced to only 1 millimeter from the original 6 millimeters. This meant the pipe had severely corroded. Clearly, the pipe being submerged in the damp environment of the drainage ditch for many years without proper maintenance had caused it to gradually corrode and eventually rupture. So, who should be held responsible for the severe degradation of this pipe? The question was immediately raised, and the finger of blame pointed to the pipe's owner, LCI Chemical Company. However, LCI management quickly shifted the responsibility to the unit that built the pipe, the Chinese Petroleum Corporation, CPC, a state-owned company. They argued that CPC should be responsible for maintaining the pipe they built because LCI didn't even have the key to access the pipeline. For their part, CPC did not remain idle. They responded to the accusation by presenting evidence, a contract signed with LCI. According to it, CPC was only responsible for constructing the pipe, not for maintenance. However, regardless of who was responsible, one undeniable fact was the negligence of the operators at CGTDC port and LCI plant. They did not thoroughly address the abnormal signs in the system. The gas pump was only shut off 16 minutes before the explosion occurred, despite clear signs showing that gas from the port was not reaching the plant. Evidenced by a large discrepancy between input and output flow rates and a sharp drop in pipeline pressure. But before the parties could argue further, on August 5th, prosecutors stepped in, conducting searches of the offices of CGTDC Port and LCI Chemical Company, and seizing documents related to the accident. The investigation concluded with the arrests of the CEO and 5 employees of LCI Chemical Company, 3 employees of CGTDC Port, and 3 employees of the Kaohsiung Public Works Bureau. All were charged with negligence in inspecting or maintaining the gas pipeline, leading to the unfortunate accident. Looking back, one fortunate aspect was that the explosion occurred around midnight when traffic was very light. If the explosion had happened during the day when the streets were crowded with people and vehicles, the consequences would certainly have been much more horrific, with casualties beyond measure. Material damage was also extremely severe. The cost to rebuild streets, infrastructure, and damaged buildings was estimated at about 1.9 billion Taiwan dollars, equivalent to over 68 million US dollars, a truly enormous figure. After the incident, public anger grew increasingly. They were outraged that CGTDC Port and LCI Chemical Company had ignored clear signs of the impending disaster. They failed to fulfill their responsibilities in inspecting and maintaining the pipeline system. The people also expressed anger towards the city government. They believed the government responded too slowly when the first signs of the gas leak appeared. Specifically, when residents reported white smoke rising from manholes. Additionally, people expressed dissatisfaction because they were unaware that a dangerous industrial gas pipeline was running right beneath their homes. This lack of information transparency prevented residents from proactively avoiding risks. To quell public opinion and regain people's trust, the Kaohsiung government and later other cities in Taiwan enacted an important regulation. All infrastructure projects must be publicly disclosed through the media. From this disaster, the Taiwanese government also recognized gaps in public safety management and introduced measures to prevent similar accidents from happening in the future. Specifically, they demanded that inspections of the system and gas pipelines be conducted more frequently, regularly, and strictly. Additionally, an intensive training program was implemented to equip firefighters with better knowledge, especially skills for handling gas-related incidents. However, the lesson learned from the gas explosion in Kaohsiung is truly a painful one. Is it only when lives are taken that the entire system truly cares about the responsibilities they should have had? Must we pay with blood and tears to realize the importance of preventing potential hazards around us? And with that, our story for today comes to an end. Together with Con Ha and the Real Incidents channel, please share this story with more people to collectively raise public awareness about community safety. It is hoped that similar tragedies will never be repeated. Before we end, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the Real Incidents channel to explore more interesting stories together. Now, Con Ha bids farewell and looks forward to seeing you in the next videos.
If the veil stirred, subscribe and meet the next encounter.